many subjects relating to circularity and regenerative, and the role of investors, climate change, etc. And we're looking forward to a great conversation this morning about the circular economy in fashion. We touched on elements of it yesterday, particularly in the session where we talked about regenerative agriculture, but of course, circular brings in all of those materials which are non-organic, as well as those that are organic. So it's fascinating in the sense that I think we decided one of the conclusions of the session yesterday that was regenerative. The regenerative was more about what was naturally grown, and of course, circular covers other materials as well, and of course, recycling and reuse of those is becoming ever more prevalent, and we're going to discuss some of that over the next 50 minutes. You can see from your agenda who's joining us, and you can also see from their names on Zoom. So I'm not going to introduce them in great depth. They're allowed to say one or two sentences about who they are when they kick off, but no more than that. And we're going to get straight into the conversation, which is around circularity at scale. Is it about material innovation and disruptive technologies? What else is in that mix? So joining us very early in the morning from Eastern Canada, Stephen Bethel, thank you so much for your support at Bank & Vogue of our work and our conference. And let me turn to you first, Stephen. Have we got the question right? Is it about disruptive technologies and material innovation for the circular economy at scale? Certainly your business model is really circular based. So it's perhaps about a bit more than that. Why don't you kick us off, Stephen, with some opening comments on getting to scale, and then we'll turn to our other panelists. Stephen, welcome.
Yeah, morning. Yeah, Tobias, before I start, I should say that I'm a massive fan of the Innovation Forum, of what you're doing, Tobias, and the connections and friends that I've made at your conferences in the past. I'm honestly I'm excited to sort of engage in an honest conversation. But my proverbial hat off to you and everybody at the Innovation Forum for holding this conference. It's sort of funny when we're thinking about what have we got it right about the question. I remember once I was in factory. We had a designer from our London office in the factory, in our upcycling factory, and me being the exuberant recycler as I am, I started talking about materials in the factory, and she turned to me. She was a London trained designer, and she gently grabbed my hand and said, "Stephen, in fashion, we don't use materials. Builders who build buildings use materials. We're in fashion, we use fabric and dresses, we and garments. So the first word I would actually challenge is materials. If the fashion student was around the table, she would say, it's innovation in fabrics rather than materials. But anyhow, I thought it was a point that one should make. And the funny thing is that and then the definition of what actually is scale, I think is an interesting conversation, just to sort of break the question down. But in our company, we see, I think that part of the problem is even understanding the scale of the problem. Americans, as an example, buy 450 million pairs of jeans a year. Our commitment, so we are recyclers, so we collect used clothes in the United States, then we find places around the world for it. But our commitment to to reduce cell is 30,000 metric tons, which would be half of their factory, which is 60,000 metric tons, which is relevantly about 10% of overall annual production of denim. I think that's scale. So I feel like there should be a conversation about what actually scale is, but part of it, I guess I would also put out a challenge that this idea of innovating in fabrics has actually got us really in trouble from our perspective. We've gotten too clever where we've made fabrics that are really difficult as a recycler to find homes for in different materials and different fabrics. So I think there are challenges with our innovations in fabrics that have gotten us in problems. So I would say that's actually not the solution. Maybe the solution is not being so clever. anyhow, it's just a couple of thoughts to start the conversation.
Well, let me ask you, Stephen, about your business specifically. We're seeing lots of larger companies starting to ride that trend and talk about their investment in used and vintage clothes and so on. What are the opportunities for an organization like yours and others doing similar things who are perhaps a bit smaller than some of these huge brands to partner with them and to help share the lessons and to drive further scale? How is that? How are those sort of conversations happening? Are those conversations happening about how you collaborate with bigger players in the industry to share what you've learned beyond these conferences?
Yeah, our mantra as a company is innovative and relative solutions to the crisis of stuff. We as a company, we move about 5,000 containers of used clothes a year. And the new apparel business is sort of kind of woken up to, hey, maybe there's an opportunity. And what we're really excited about is how can used be an input to new manufacturing? And the real opportunity, as an example of that, is our collaboration with Converse. You know, Obviously, the first thing we want to do is, as a company, we have retail arms in circularity. The first thing we want to do is encourage resale. And how do we encourage resale? And there's certainly partnerships, and I think some of the other panelists could speak to resale a lot more. But secondly, if it's not about resale, how can we manufacture as an input to using used as an input? And to me, this is the most exciting thing that I really would like to sort of open the audience's eyes to, is the quickest path to lowest carbon production is using existing materials. And a golden example is the work we did with Converse, where we supplied the upper of the Chuck Taylor from used denim. And this is absolutely the quickest path to low carbon footprint, where we're using existing materials. And on Thursday last week, the same shoe was released, but in a Hawaiian print. So we're just taking used shirts that are discarded from that have we've tried to sell them domestically, we tried to sell them internationally, it didn't work, and we can use used as an input to manufacturing. To me, this is really exciting. And then what scale? When we've made hundreds of thousands of products, I think that scale. So, Tobias, to answer your question, I think the exciting opportunity in front of us is how can we use used at scale in manufacturing, and just sort of pull the curtain back on the benefits of footprint.
Thank you. And talking about getting it into other brands, the designers that sort of set the trends in fashion are sort of famous for doing just that. What's your level of engagement with the sort of the big houses that help set some of the trends? It's all very well for sort of middle class students to get very excited about buying an ethical pair of trainers, but that doesn't necessarily get us to where we need to be. I wonder what the conversation is beyond Converse with the sort of more high-end fashion side of things that perhaps set some of the global trends. Do you have any? Are they interested in what you're doing, or do we see them perhaps taking a bit more of a kind of what's the word? An occasional look at it. What's your sense of the rate of change there, Stephen?
Yeah, I think the change is real. I mean, look, on Monday you'll see that Dolce & Gabbana came out with a patchwork denim jacket that was out there. I think that to me, and total respect to the luxury market, to me, the word scale actually inspires us to talk about the non-luxury market, because the reality is we're not going to move the needle on the problem with the luxury houses. Really, if we can craft this nut, I am as a business, we're more excited about cracking the nut with a Nike family member than we are with a luxury house, because that's where we're going to move the needle. That's where we're going to see scale. And as difficult as a project as it can be, I would just challenge everybody in the room that if you're making bags, if you're making blouses and dresses. 2 weeks ago, we did a drop with Gina Treecut. It's a retailer in Scandinavia through into Germany, and we made a whole range of apparel from upcycled material. It sold out in a week. I'm more excited about doing that than a luxury house because it's real scale.
Thank you. Well, Georgia, let me turn to you then. Let's talk about the influence a luxury house can have, because Yux Net-a-Porter, famously, you say on your website you're highly committed to this agenda, and I know you've been doing a lot in this space, and I'm sure there's a lot of influence that you can put on the market in terms of encouraging scale and making it aspirational. And that's the key thing, isn't it? I mean, I suppose my point was, Stephen, and you can come back to this later, I know you'll have a view, is that the aspiration for fashion comes from a sense of desire, a sense of wanting something that looks good. And of course, the luxury houses have a role to play in helping create those desires. So, Georgia, let me turn to you for some opening thoughts on this. I'd love to hear your point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. As you know, one of the let's say key areas of our sustainability strategy that we launched last November is really circular culture. So it's really how we can use, in a way, our influence and our connection to really scale, I would say, on circularity. We use the Porter Group, I think, is in a very quite unique, I would say, position as we are a leading online luxury retailer, really at the intersection between thousands of brand partners on one side, that the one we stock, and millions of customers across 180 countries. So we believe, let's say, there is definitely space for influencing there. On the other side, we have 4 different brands, Net-a-Porter, Mr. Porter, Yux, and the Outnet, that are fully online, and which means technology and innovation has really been innate within our work, and we can put innovation to good use. So the let's say probably the challenges we got in year 1 really of this exercise of scaling up circularity has been the fact that we are really redesigning our business model without an industry blueprint, and so we decided in a way to use an approach where we first of all look at internally our own private label, try to launch pilots, learn from them, and then use this learning to really to share, first of all, with our brand partners, and then potentially with the broader industry. But that's, in a way, is really our approach, I would say, to scale up, as we have seen really a lot of interest also from brand partners to really have some real space for collaboration. To give an idea, when we even started to think of okay, we are going to commit to for 2025 for our private label to be fully sustainable and circular, there was not a definition out there. So we actually put together like our own, let's say, in-house design guideline for sustainable and circular products. And it's something we are really testing with our own private label first, and even sharing with our brand partners and create collaboration with them. As is something that is, I mean, to really come up with our own definition, it really took a lot of talkings and sharing with, I mean, from Ellen MacArthur Foundation that we are part of to some of the brand partners we work with. And I think the other important point for us was also how we can use technology, as I was mentioning before. So one, I think, interesting project that we did is our digital ID, the technology we use with our partner E.ON, and the circular ID protocol. So also in this case, we try to find, let's say, I think the use of the protocol for us was quite important because it's not something that we try to create on our own. I think there's a lot of reinventing the wheel or starting from scratch, while I would really want to find real collaboration, to try to start really from a different level than level 0, sort of, for everything we are tapping on circularity. And on that's why we partner with E.ON, and it's one of the, I think, most fascinating project we are really following there. Is, to me, is sort of a digital passport that we are creating for all clothes that we sell, and we hope also our brand partners will jump on into it to really scale this up properly. And it's like giving really a digital passport to a garment that show their whole journey. So that I think is also quite fascinating for us, and this is where I think luxury can make a difference, because I think the experience that you can create for the final customer is and the engagement, I would say, out of it is where they start really to understand the value of extending the life. I think Stephen has touched a quite interesting point that is it's definitely much more interesting to try to extend the life of material and product. And this is what, in a way, we are trying really to do with digital ID. So it's the fact that you, let's say, open new services such as care and repair, such as resale, to customer. You make it very easy for them to jump on that and use them. I think is a great starting point for really educating and engaging them into like new ways of really using your products.
Thank you. So what would that look like? That last bit you mentioned around a kind of something that shows the product's life cycle or where its journey. If I'm a customer and I'm buying something, what does that physically look like to me? It sounds very exciting.
So there's many ways of doing it. We've definitely learned a lot out of it. But like what we ended up to is a QR code that is sewn into the label of the product. So of course we are trying to, let's say, tasting and making always more engaging for customer to really bring the customer to actually scan this code. And we have seen from the launch really last November how this has definitely increased in terms of their engagement and how many times they're scanning it. And once you get in, of course, we design a sort of very nice experience there, but like you can see everything from where the product was designed, where the materials come from, where it was like manufacturer was, and so on, up to like care and repair, for example. Like we partner with a couple of different services there, and the customer can easily, let's say, book an appointment for a care or repair. And the next step for us will definitely be connected to resale, so that there will be very easy for them to resell any product, and potentially even upcycling. This I think is another, so in a way the digital ID for us, so consider that is at the moment based on a standard database. So it's all this data stored on a database. So we are of course designing and spending more time in designing the experience for the customer. But the beauty of it to me is that is a protocol, and is what Ian has created is really an ecosystem that can connect together different stakeholders, such as, I mean, it could even be Stephen company, I would say most probably, that I could connect into it. And it makes very simple for brands, potentially. I mean, we are, I would say, the only retailer using that now, but for brands to connect and really have a full ecosystem of services that their customer could go into.
Sure. So let me just clarify. So I could buy a garment, and amongst the very confusing sort of almost deck of cards of labels I sometimes get in a garment, incomprehensible stuff on them, there might be next to that a QR code. I can use my phone and I can see where I can get that garment repaired, where I can get it upcycled, what I can do with it, and I can take a proactive stance on from that information. That's fascinating, and that could be a real way of getting to scale. We do conferences on agriculture and food, and I recently did a session with the head of marketing and comms for Dole Foods. And Dole Foods, I actually did it in where I live, which is how I knew about it. I found some Dole bananas, and it had a QR code, and it said, see where these bananas came from. And just a QR code. So I got my phone out, and I got an augmented reality, virtual reality tour on my phone of a Colombian organic banana farm, where I could move my phone around. I could travel around the plantation and the factory, and I could see the workers processing organic bananas. And I thought, wow, if you can do that for such a low margin industry as bananas, and by the way, the margins are terrible on bananas. They're just something supermarkets have to sell, or they don't get any customers. So if you can do that with bananas, what's the potential for higher margin goods? So I asked the head of marketing about it for Dole, and he said they had millions and millions of uses of that QR code by consumers. So if consumers are prepared to do that on bananas, what are they prepared to do on a $200 jacket or a pair of Converse shoes. I think that's a fascinating.
Yeah, I think especially when you do have incentives in a way, because I think it really becomes one of the words also we use is connected products. So it's in a way even an extension of the value of the product itself, because you can get like special camera repair services just for that specific item, because we're talking about unique digital ID. So I think it's quite fascinating how actually a brand can even evolve their relationship with the final customer, and at the same time really try to have the product used for longer.
Yeah, fascinating. Well, look, we'll come back to that, Georgia. There'll be lots of questions. You already have a question on the chat from Tara Luckman. So while I speak to our other panelists, maybe, Georgia, you can go on the chat and answer Tara's question. We can talk more about that later. I bet Stephen's going to have something to say about this. So, Stephen, we'll come back to you on this point. But let me now turn to Sarah. Sarah, how is all this sounding to you? Is this reflecting your experience? Where are you on this key question of circularity at scale for your business and for the ecosystems of partners that you work with? Sarah, over to you.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I have actually been working in sustainability for 17 years now, so I've seen a lot of things, and I'm very happy about this acceleration that we are witnessing. That's a great opportunity. It poses some challenges for sure, but it's a time where really we understand what needs to be done. We have a clearer understanding, and we have been also able to bring some topics that are a bit awkward and complex. Like we've been talking about upcycling and regenerative, and like if it was normal, and this wasn't the case 15 years ago. So we have come forward a lot. So, but we need to go a lot more, a lot faster, and a lot farther on that. So I mean, all this resonates with me, with what we are doing as a group. And as you may or may not know, I mean, for example, one of the brands that composes the OTB group is Maison Margiela. And Martin Margiela was back in the days when nobody was talking about upcycling. He was going around Brussels flea markets and buying clothes and disassembling them and reassembling them. So he was able to kind of invent a way of doing couture through upcycling without, this being known as upcycling. So in a way, I have the luxury, quote unquote, to be in a group where certain values are really in the core of the businesses. If you think about the upcycling for Margiela, if you think about durability, for example, for Diesel, with the denim and all the workwear, and where products were made to last because you had to physically work in them, so they need to last. So for sure there are a lot of differences about the more the luxury sector and the premium sector, in a way, about scale. Like the approach that Margiela has is still on couture. So there is a Recicla that was launched in 2019. It was very successful, that keeps though a couture approach, which is the DNA of the house. And for example, with Diesel, we can go a lot, on volumes and do really scale. And there are a lot of projects and pilots that we are putting in place where we test solutions, and then we try then to maybe bring them to another product categories to overcome a bit the boundaries between product categories, to which we get creative. We find a solution that works on shoes. Then maybe we use waste of textile that were made for the apparel into the living. There is a living and houseware line for Diesel. Also now we try to mix and match what we have in-house, what are the materials, where we can use them, even if it's not apparel on apparel, but maybe apparel on, then we go to living to bring up the scale. So there are many, many ways to do it. We are also looking into, for sure, the digitalization of the information as much as we can. So also on some products, we have QR codes that bring you to a landing page where you can get an experience, but you can also get educated. And as you were saying, Tobias, you buy a product, you've got 10,000 labels, and it's very difficult to navigate. For a standard consumer, it's very difficult to understand what you're actually paying for and buying. So the angle we've taken is also to explain and walk you through the labels and walk you through what's in this product, from also, on a first layer, a very nice experience where you feel engaged. On a deeper layer, if you want, you can get also the technical information, for example, on the denim, on the washings, on the treatments, which are the most problematic, if you like, parts of a denim, or you disassembling. How do you disassembling before recycling? What do you have to do? What are the parts you have to look at? So we've taken this double angle, the experience and the engagement, but also the education of the customers. And for sure, you can do many different things according to the positioning. And we have now upcycling collection with pretty much all the brands that sometimes use pre-consumer fabrics or post-consumer fabrics for post-consumer products that are like repurposed and rematched. And as you were saying, and as it was Steven was saying, that's the easiest way to reduce the carbon footprint, because you don't have to redo the material. So you just use the material as such. So that's a huge advantage. And being able also to take the designers to the stocks and show them, look what you have at your disposal. You can take them, do what you want, take this fabric, make it into something else, and it's kind of very exciting for them that they have, you know, such a volume of such a different types of fabrics also at their disposal they can play with. So we are getting them engaged on a very practical level, and that's proven kind of successful so far.
Thank you. And with the projects and the brands that you mentioned, let's look towards, say, 2025, a few years down the road. Where do you see those sort of projects being by then in terms of scale? What's your ambition, and where do you want to get to by then? Let's think relatively short term, so we can keep it in a timescale that we can almost see.
Yeah. So with some projects like Recicla that are well established, we can for sure look at depth without losing the couture angle. That's what makes that line successful. With diesel, actually, we are very, very ambitious targets for 2025, and we are also looking at the resale and the buyback. That's something very different from a retailer standpoint and from a brand standpoint. And this is something maybe you don't know, but it's funny. I mean, funny. It's problematic, but it's funny. In Italy, for example, if Diesel wanted to buy back his own denim from private customers, we will have to deal with the legislation on waste. So in Italy, technically, we would be dealing with waste, and the legislation around waste is absolutely a nightmare. So, you know, there are some boundaries that are very hard to overcome, but we are trying to find a solution for that. So for 2025, we will have found a solution for that. So we will have the buyback in place. The upcycling will be the norm. In the textile, but also in the shoes and bags, but also in the living, with all that living house textile and Marni as well. We are doing a lot of the shoes as well, and the bags. So I think for 2025, all these pilot projects and smaller lines that we created will be a lot bigger, and probably a differentiator for some of the brands like Margiela that were actually born around it.
Great, thank you. Well, lots of questions coming in. Thank you so much, Sarah. I have lots of questions, but we need to leave some time for the audience to ask them. We've got about 20 minutes left, so I'm going to bring in our final speaker, Naresh. Naresh, tell us briefly about Aditya Birla. You may be slightly less well known than perhaps some of the others on here, but very briefly. And then I suppose you're going to tell us that viscose is the most circular product, and that we should all be using that if we want to get sustainability at scale in terms of circular. But look forward to hearing your comments on what you've heard, Naresh, and on the subject at hand. So welcome.
Sure. Thank you, Toby. And hope I'm audible, because I'm from India network maybe. So let me know if I'm not audible sometime. We, Aditya Birla Group, it is one of the largest business house in India. And we have a business in textile, fiber, and retail business. I represent fashion retail business. We are the largest retailer of India in fashion space. We have 13, 14 brands with us. And for us, I think that whole, being the largest business house in India, biggest responsibility is how we take that whole concept, which is traditional concept, take, make, and dispose, to that closed loop or circular business model. In line with that, I think a lot of innovation and a lot of material innovation is happening. But let me give overview of retail, what we have been doing. I think for us, first and foremost is that how we build a case, how we build an ecosystem where we engage all stakeholders from the traditional model of garment making and retailing to that next model of design, make, reuse, remake, a model of circularity. And in that, I think many aspects which we look, one is definitely material innovation, but to a larger ecosystem, we have taken a program called integrated waste management. And in our integrated waste management, no single gram of our material goes into landfill. Perhaps we are the only company in India not to have any single gram of wastage to landfill. I think that is one of the achievement which we have kind of standardized. But to bring that whole systematic change, a lot of behavior change is required within the organization and outside with the stakeholder. So we are bringing that how to have all that recycled material. We use lot recycled cotton, recycled polyester, recycled viscose. Our own company have now launched Reviva, which is made from the pre-consumer waste. So how to engage your consumer even to bring back their old cloth, how to involve your stakeholder not to waste, not to have wastage as a landfill, but as a resource, as a material re-innovation or material. All these things, I think we have been trying hard to make it happen in India. But to create ecosystem, I think one side you have to innovate yourself, but you have to bring a lot of innovation from other ecosystem, and how you get technology, how you get a stakeholder on board to have that systematic change. And in that, we are happy to collaborate with not only with our stakeholder, but some of the industry from Allen MacArthur. We have been working with them for last 3 years. Even in India, we are anchoring that circular apparel innovation factory, which whole theme is to build the business model which revolve around circular economy. And finally, how you get not only material innovation, but all your value chain and partner, not for only environment footprint, but most important is social footprint. How you have inclusiveness of bringing your garmenter, bringing your supplier, bringing your R&D institute, bringing together a lot of other fiber innovation and companies together to make that change happen for the industry. And in line with that, in India, we partner with 16 brands uh, uh, and we sign place called SURE, Sustainable Resolution, where by 2025, all these 16 companies in 5 years want to bring sustainable consumption, responsible consumption, ethical manufacturing as a whole theme and DNA of the retail and manufacturing philosophy. So with that, I think we have adopted as a approach how we take life cycle thinking or products life cycle management as a tool to build material which is used more, to build material from the material which is made to be made again, and finally look into that alternate and renewable or recycled material which can not only make the whole ecosystem, but bring quality, bring a stakeholder together for social and inclusive growth.
Thanks very much. There are some questions for you in the chat, Naresh, which we'll come to. A question for you about I suppose the Indian middle class. I mean, clearly there's a huge distraction at the moment with the tragic events which are taking place in your wonderful country, and our hearts and thoughts go out to all Indians suffering at this time. But beyond the terrible events of COVID at the moment, how are the rising Indian middle classes regarding the notion of circularity? How is it becoming aspirational there? We see skepticism in some quarters that in emerging markets there's some cliche that everything has to be new and shiny and made of gold and unsustainable. But we also see some incredible stats coming out of places like China, looking at the middle class and what they want on sustainability, and with India too. So what's your sense of the sort of acceleration of the desire for circular approaches and materials among those in India who perhaps are, above that economic line where they can afford to think more about their materials and their fabrics? What are your views on that?
Yeah. Very interesting question. And I think in that last 1 year, because of pandemic, one side we have that challenge to navigate through that pandemic, but same time that sustainable consumption has accelerated. And in that time, I think our whole India, where most of the economy comes from middle class or mass market, we have brand which is mostly premium or mid market or mass market. What we see as a challenge, I think it become as an opportunity for us, because being the leading brand and fashion retail company in India, sometimes you set the example and you create aspiration other to follow. In that line, what we did, we launched a program called Take Back Program, and that name of the program was Share Happiness. One of our mid-market brand called Peter England, we launched that Share Happiness program, and we encourage our consumer to bring back their old cloth. And it was kind of first time in India where any brand is saying that you bring your old cloth and we'll give you new cloth. And that, to our surprise, we find very, very good response on that. What we did with that huge merchandise, we tie up with that some of that our partners. We segregated it, what can be used for after repair or after refurbishing for more use, because in India, a lot of underprivileged people who don't have proper clothes. So how you create social impact by reusing and repairing that cloth, giving that to underprivileged people. Second thing, how you have that ecosystem which can give these clothes for that upcycling. We supported a lot in terms of that getting material upcycle. Third, I think part which is still we are finding challenge, because a lot of R&D is going on and we have advantage of having our own fiber company. How to segregate it and how to get it recycle for the closed loop to make the pulp and fiber again. I think that is the part which we find more challenge, because quality, cost and reverse logistic, until unless you have all stakeholders on same page. But from creating that consumer awareness program, the kind of response, actually we were surprised to have higher sale because of this program. And the same consumer came back again for giving or buying more cloth. On one side, we find that it was successful, but same time, we thought we need to create whole ecosystem and how to bring a small brand, a small manufacturer, because in India, a lot of garmenting happen through SME. So how to create more and more awareness. And with that, we created that platform called Circular Apparel Innovation Factory. In last 2 years, with the responsible organization coming together, with our brand and many other leading brand in India coming together, I think this whole acceleration, even in pandemic, has gone little higher. So mid-market or mass market is still, scalability is a long way to go, but it's early sign of success. And we are seeing a lot of opportunity to bring Indian consumer for appreciating sustainable fashion, sustainable consumption, though still closed loop ecosystem may take 1 or 2 more years, but I think it is happening. And Indian consumer, being the value-driven consumer, though they don't pay higher premium for these kind of fashion, but they appreciate it and they are coming forward to support these kind of initiative. With that, I think it's early start, but I find next couple of years, India will be fulcrum of making these circular and recycle material, as well as bringing whole stakeholder together for design, make, remake, and remake again model. So I think that loop model, what we call, is yet to come to that full fledged, but it is almost there.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. And I guess it's also really optimistic to hear your views that there may be this acceleration. And I suppose very important to remember that in many countries such as India, there is a real culture of not letting anything go to waste, that everything is a useful resource, and traditionally everything can be upcycled or recycled. And, you know, I've seen that firsthand myself. And I think using that energy to kind of turn it towards modern sustainability could be fascinating, I think. So that's really interesting to hear. We'll come back to some questions about that. There was one quick question for you, Naresh, about offcuts. I just want to ask you about that. Robin Kimber was asking, he or she said, you say none of your material goes to landfill. What do you do with offcuts? If you could just answer that briefly, I'm curious.
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I couldn't hear.
No, there was a question from Robin Kimber that said, tell us if you're being misquoted here. That Robin says, you say none of your material goes to landfill. What do you do with offcuts?
Okay. So all that our material which is waste in the system, be it factories, warehouse, or retail store, we have integrated waste management. 99.8% of our waste goes for recycle or reuse. Only that 0.3, 0.4% goes for that co-processing. So none, we have built kind of QR code system to trace that whole waste in our operation. And we have that tie-up with that recycler and reprocessor to take it from us. And then we have that whole system of traceability to manage how it is being recycled or reprocessed. 99.4 or 5% of our waste, which we track fully for recycle and reuse, give us confidence that none of our waste goes to landfill, and 0.4% goes for that incineration or composite, which is very small amount. Again, it goes to that certified people who handle it, who take it from us, and then it goes for further processing. So none of our, be it packaging waste, be it fabric waste, be any type of waste, we have 5 types of waste, nothing goes to landfill. We have very robust system.
Thank you, very helpful. Lots of questions, about 7 minutes left, so I'll encourage our panels to speed up their comments. Dawa Dorje, excuse me if I got your name wrong there, Dawa, asks Stephen and Georgia. Stephen, let me come to you first on this. How much does the concept of recycling or upcycling at scale attract the retailers in adoption from a commercial cost / margin point of view? Stephen, any views on that?
Yeah, so just quickly, to Sarah's point, that the really exciting thing as somebody who stands in the stream of all this raw material coming in, this idea of pulling the curtain back and saying to the design houses, hey, look at all this material available. And to Naresh's point, our factory, Bank of Oak factory, is in the Gujarat. I'm proudly, all of the talent around the table doing our work is Indian talent. So Naresh, I absolutely, agree with your sentence that India will be at the forefront of this upcycling and recycling. And as the question to the margin and costs, look, at the end of the day, this costs more money, absolutely. But I think the view here is it is the quickest path to carbon reduction. And if it is the quickest path to carbon reduction, maybe we as a sort of as a systematic thing have to look at what are actual costs. Is it dollar costs or carbon costs? So I kind of fudge the answer that way, Tobias.
Thank you, Giorgio. What are your thoughts on this question?
Well, I think is overall for us quite interesting. We are seeing that a lot with our private label, as there's I would say definitely an appetite from customer coming on this. So we had Net Sustain, that is our sustainability edit at Net-a-Porter, where more than actually 2/3 of our customers are now actively, let's say, buying. So there has been such an increase in this type of product that, I mean, I think for us, looking at our private label and even brand partners that are really, I would say, investing quite a bit on that is something that we are keeping looking at. I would say more from a brand and private label point of view. When it comes to us as a retailer, I think we have already quite a bit let's say, a structured process of, let's say, managing our waste in a way. So I think we are a bit still far from thinking or connecting retailer to the upcycling bit. So we're looking at more from a brand perspective.
Okay, thank you. There's a question, perhaps for all of you, from Yana Polari. He says, what part does data collection and management play in accessing materials to reuse dead stock, etc., given that data is an enabler for scaling circularity? Sarah, why don't you try and tackle that one initially, and then we'll see who else has a brief comment.
Yes, so we are in the process of having a huge digital transformation work stream within the company, and we actually integrated sustainability also into that stream, so that the two work together. Because as I mentioned, we want the designers to play with dead stock, but it's not as simple as that, because if you don't have all the characteristics of the fabrics that you have in stock, because maybe they've been there for some time, and at that time they were not properly, you didn't record all the little fields around sustainability, all the sustainability characteristic of the fabrics, that's a barrier. So we are extensively working on that, on all the new products, but also on getting back on the stocks and looking at what we have in-house to digitalize that part too, so it doesn't go to waste, literally. And for new products, for sure, the digital transformation and the ID, and we're working extensively with the IT on a project that we called Trace to Transparency, as an internal program that we launched with IT and all the brands to stress how important the data is as an enabler.
Okay, I'm seeing lots of nodding there from other panelists. If anyone else has something to say on that, wave at me, but we've only got 2 minutes left, so I'm going to ask you all to answer a great question which has been placed by Ushi Reutner. And if you could be fairly brief in your responses, please. Naresh, I'm going to start with you, but please be fairly brief in your response. Ushi says, what do you think about more strict, even mandatory regulations for business? Example, use recycled materials in the first place to accelerate the process of textile to textile recycling. Now, in the European Union, it's not impossible that this sort of thing might happen at some point. You look at fashion's impact, you look at the transparency and reporting around it, you look at other initiatives which they said were going to bankrupt industries, like the WE directive, like the REACH legislation. These actually caused quite a lot of innovative practices to happen amongst industry. So it's not off the table that this sort of thing could happen given the climate crisis. So what do we think is a good position for business to take on this? Do you think this is something that could or should happen? Naresh, let me ask you to be very brief because we only have a minute or two.
So I think a very good question. And India, though legislation is not like that what it is in Europe, but it's emerging very fast. India, that now all producer, importer, and brand owner, it's mandatory to have EPR, extended producer responsibility. You have to comply with that to collect all your waste, including your plastic waste. Same time, government is or other regulatory are in discussion how to incentivize, how to promote concept of recycle and circularity. Early stage, but I think this whole concept is emerging very fast, and government and regulatory framework is already in pipeline. It's matter of once we sail through this pandemic challenge, maybe you will find a lot of change in fashion industry related to regulatory and sustainability. But I think sustainability has come much faster.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful and fascinating. Stephen, what are the chances of this happening in Canada anytime soon? Briefly, very briefly, please.
Yeah, I think Canada very likely, California, super likely, and I think it's absolutely going to supersize, and the speed up the how do we get recycled content in products? Absolutely.
Okay, great. Sarah, you did the last question, so I'm going to put this one to Georgia to close. Georgia, when do you think it's going to happen in the EU? Is it on the cards?
I hope very soon, as I was mentioning our Infinity product framework before, and we took exactly this approach, and we prioritized recycled natural and animal-based fibers for that. So I really hope this is happening, because as I was saying before, we really created our own framework ourselves. But if this comes from Europe, I would be extremely happy.
Great, thank you, Sarah. I was going to ask you for this as well, but we're out of time. Thank you all for a fantastic session. You've been very honest. It's been very optimistic. Often when you talk about circular economy, it's it's one of these things that's the future and always will be. But I'm actually really getting a sense of progress and optimism from all of you in the last hour on the near-term future for circular approaches. So thank you. We are going to take a 9-minute break now before we come back to discuss the politics, trade and red lines on human rights, which are emerging in apparel and textiles. I'm sure none of you will want to miss that session. It'll be challenging and fascinating. So we'll see you back here in now 8 minutes time. And to the panel, thank you so much for your time, your commitment, your engagement and your contributions.
Thank you.